You know, when you look at 2024, it really feels like the world is being pulled in a dozen different directions all at once, doesn't it? We're staring down this wild mix of economic challenges, massive tech revolutions, and some really deep structural changes. So, how do we even begin to make sense of it all? Well, that's exactly what we're going to dig into.
I saw this quote from Klaas Knot, who's the president of the Netherlands Bank, and it just clicked. It perfectly captures the vibe of this year. It's this powerful idea that everything, our economies, our rules, the way we work, has to keep moving, keep adapting. Because if you stand still, you get left behind. It's as simple as that.
So that's the big question we're tackling today, isn't it? What's really driving all this change? We're going to start with the big 30,000-foot view of the economy, and then we're going to bring it all the way down to what it means for you, for our jobs, and for our careers.
All right, first up, let's talk about the here and now, the immediate challenge. Let's call it the great economic test of 2024. This is the turbulence that pretty much every business and every one of us is trying to navigate right now.
The big picture globally? Well, things are slowing down a bit. The IMF thinks growth will dip just a little this year, and meanwhile, you've got central banks basically walking this incredibly fine tightrope. They're trying to stamp out the last bits of inflation without accidentally tipping their economies into a nosedive. It's a really tricky balancing act.
And you can see that story playing out right here in the inflation numbers. The good news? We're not seeing those crazy, eye-watering price spikes like we did back in 2022. But inflation is still hanging around a bit higher than anyone wants in both Europe and the US. So, the key takeaway here? The fever has broken, for sure, but we're all still feeling the after effects.
Okay, so what does that actually mean in the real world? Well, for us, for households, it means the pressure on the cost of living is still very real. And for businesses, higher interest rates mean borrowing money is more expensive and risky. It really is a squeeze coming from both sides.
But here's the thing. The economy is just one part of the story. If you look underneath all these day-to-day headwinds, there are these much bigger, deeper forces that are reshaping our world for the long haul.
And it's so important to get this, because while we're all focused on the daily news cycle, these massive trends are fundamentally changing the rules of the game for years, maybe even decades to come.
So what are these giant forces? According to analysis from Deloitte, there are three great reshapers. First up is geopolitics. You know, global tensions are making companies rethink their supply chains, leading to things like friendshoring. Second, there's sustainability. That huge push toward net zero is still moving forward. And third, the big one, technology, where innovation is just relentlessly pushing for more efficiency and totally new ways of doing things.
And the really crucial part is that none of these things exist in their own little bubble. They're all tangled together. Think about it. A geopolitical event can mess up supply chains, which then affects the green transition, and of course, technology is woven through all of it. It creates this incredibly complex web that we're all trying to figure out.
So let's zoom in on what is probably the most disruptive force of them all right now: technology. Specifically, let's talk about the AI revolution, because it is just getting started.
I mean, AI has just exploded onto the scene, and now everybody's scrambling to catch up, especially the regulators. And what we're seeing is, well, it's kind of messy. You've got the European Union over here with this super detailed prescriptive AI rulebook, and then you have the UK and the US taking a more hands-off, principles-based approach. If you're a global company trying to navigate that, well, good luck.
But here's the kicker. While the regulators are all debating, businesses are not waiting around. They are going full steam ahead. Just look at the financial sector. AI is already a huge deal for data analysis, fraud detection, and even customer service. This isn't some far-off future concept. It is happening right now as we speak.
And this AI revolution isn't just some abstract business trend. It's directly hitting the job market. In fact, the Stepstone Group, which is a huge global recruiting platform, has actually called 2024 the year of automation in recruiting. Think about that. The very process of how we find and get jobs is being transformed by AI.
But here's where it gets really interesting and kind of counterintuitive. According to Dr. Tobias Zimmerman from Stepstone, with AI handling all that initial screening, that final human-to-human interview, it's actually becoming more valuable, not less. So the tech isn't replacing the conversation, it's making that conversation even more critical.
Which brings us to the bigger picture. How are all of these shifts, the economy, the technology, fundamentally changing what it means to have a career and what the workplace even looks like?
One of the biggest trends out there is something called the global talent competition. Basically, in a lot of Western countries, workforces are shrinking, and there just aren't enough people to fill all the skilled jobs. So what happens? Companies have no choice but to look everywhere, all over the world, for the right people. Hiring has literally become a global sport.
And this talent shortage is forcing some really interesting and frankly positive changes. Companies are thinking differently. They're way more open to people who are changing careers. They're not as obsessed with what specific degree you have, it's more about what you can actually do. Plus, they're finally investing more in training their people and making their workplaces better for experienced employees.
If you boil all this down to one thing, it's this: adaptability. That is the new superpower. For companies, it means they have to adapt how they hire and train. And for us as individuals, it means we have to commit to being lifelong learners just to stay in the game.
Okay, so let's pull all these different threads together. What's the main takeaway from this whole tour of 2024?
The story of this year is really about playing two games at the same time. There's the short game, just surviving the immediate economic pressures right in front of us. And then there's the long game, making the smart moves to adapt to these massive, permanent shifts in technology and the very nature of work itself.
And as Deloitte puts it, this is all about looking ahead. The decisions and the investments that businesses make right now are the things that will decide who is still standing and thriving in the future. It's all about future-proofing your business.
And that brings us right back to where we started, doesn't it? That core idea that our world is in constant motion. It cannot and will not stand still. And to navigate a world like that, we all need to be in a state of constant, intelligent adaptation.
So, I'll leave you with one final thought. In a world that is absolutely guaranteed to keep changing, a world that won't stand still for anyone, the most important question you can ask yourself or your team is a pretty simple one. Are you ready for it?